Muted. Karaoke. I've signed you all up. Richard Marks karaoke. It's only limited to that. Oh, look, hot mic. There it was. We were just waiting for that. But you can't hear Justin yet. There it is. It's good. Can we even take the segmenting down further? Even like, how many of you are students? Excellent. I love seeing that. How many of you guys are programmers? Okay, sysops, other kind of stuffs like technical writing, testing, those kind of things. Okay, cool. What else did we miss? I want everyone to have a chance to raise their hand. Oh yeah, completely non-program anything. I love it. Love it.
Awesome. So that is very loud.
It is.
Do we have any community announcements? We like to have people come up and tell about other meetups that we have going on in the city.
Hi, I'm Anna Sherman. I'm a developer at Carbon 5. And on November 29th, which is a Thursday, 6:30 in this area, we're going to be having a digital prototyping workshop. It's going to be done by our designer, Trace Meredith. And so you'll come and get some really practical skills from this. So we're going to be using Flinto and Sketch. Yeah. It's on Eventbrite, so look it up.
Awesome. Do we have any more? DevOps Day was this past weekend, right?
I believe
this
so.
Past week?
I think so, yeah.
Did anybody go to that? Awesome.
How was
Awesome.
it? Good? It was good? Yeah, it looked top shelf.
So we have a Python meetup also next Monday. So if you're at all interested in Python or want to get into building web apps, I'm going to be giving a 2-part course on building web apps with Python and Flask. So it's this coming Monday, 6 o'clock in the back room back here. So the second part will be in January, so be sure to check that out. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Paul.
There you go. I get both microphones. Is this a good idea? Come on, guys, over here. Do it now. Here, Marco, I'll just hand that to you on the way past. Yeah, that's the plan. So I thought I would welcome y'all. See how I've indoctrinated myself to the South? I'd like to welcome y'all to this. It's a little bit different than what we've done at CHADEV before, but I also think quite relevant to where we're at. Quick introduction for me, and then we'll introduce our folks I asked to join us. Paul Schreiner, one of the founders at Audience Point. We work sort of within email marketing as a build on technology. Cool stuff. Love to talk to you all about it. That's not this venue. Basically, the idea for this panel kind of came from, there was a series of conversations that were taking place across lots of channels that I had seen sort of within Chattanooga. So a little bit on the CHADEV Slack channel that we host. There was some chatter going on there on Facebook. That took place. That's how some of these folks were looped in. And then just conversations. And it's the idea that, like, where are we at? Are we going where we want to be? Like, we've invested, we put all kinds of money and resources and time into this gigabyte sort of model, the gig city, right? And with that came kind of a promise of we're going to build all kinds of amazing entrepreneurship and technology, and it's going to be great. And we all bought in. Kind of the idea was, let's have a little check-in, right? Where have we come from? An honest look at where we're at right now and where we're going. I'll have our panelists, is that the right term? Introduce themselves. I intentionally selected non-programmers. I know you're like, Paul, seriously? Non-programmers. So I didn't want an echo chamber, if that makes sense. I felt like we had a room full of programmers or a room full of technology people. So really the goal was, how do we create multiple voices? I don't have an action plan that's going to come out of this. We're not taking notes. It is being streamed. all over the world right now. But there's no, it's not that. The purpose is let's have a conversation. Let's bring this to the surface. And who knows? Maybe something can come out of it. But at this point, it's really just a conversation. So Marco, will you start us out?
Sure. So Marco Perez, I'm invited because I am Paul's co-founder's brother. And so that usually gets me in a room every once in a while. But I work for an organization here called Launch. Launch does micro-business startup among minority-owned, women-owned businesses, people in low-wealth communities. We're very focused. But in my work, I probably met with I have met with over 100 founders here in Chattanooga of all kinds of companies and all sizes or all hopeful sizes and purposes. And so through that, now I'm part-time at Launch, but I'm also helping this founder here with a company called Whirly, which is a app. He'll explain it more. And then I'm also helping just recently a company that started in Chattanooga and is kind of co-located to Atlanta as well, called Motivo, which is another software company. So my job, I am not a tech guy. I'm the guy who thinks of all the other stuff. So.
Right. So my name is Aaron Welch, and I know a good portion of you because I've probably worked with a good portion of you. Whirly is actually my third software company. My first software company, QuickQ, is one of the only exits in town. We sold to OpenTable in 2013 for $13.5 million after 2 years of crazy hard work. I've been from the very beginnings of this kind of entrepreneurial software, let's build some crazy unicorns here in Chattanooga in 2007 all the way to where we are today. And so I've kind of seen the ups and the downs and the current reality that we face and then the vision that the city is trying to sell us going forward. And so I am quietly been one of the people who's holding as many people as possible accountable to the vision that we're trying to sell. And so hopefully I'll be able to share what I've learned and then what I see us being capable of doing, not necessarily what they want us to be doing.
My name is Dirk Unkle. I was invited to this because I'm a sales guy, which is a bit different than what's going on here typically. So, quick background, I've been in sales for 10 years. Got started off out in Atlanta, and then I moved up to Chattanooga about 7 years ago to work with Access America Transport. They just had a phenomenal time. They had a very successful exit. Since then, I've gone and worked with PriceWaiter, which is a local tech startup here in town. I was their first sales guy, and I've worked with them for a number of years. And Extra Points, I also own the paddleboarding shop in Coolidge Park. So we have an e-commerce site and a brick and mortar store. So I have a little bit of everything, but most of my emphasis has been on new business development. A lot of it's centered around technology and selling SaaS and developing different partnerships. And so that is why I was invited.
Yeah, and honestly, all three of these people, I think, really embody the entrepreneurial spirit. These are, entrepreneurism, I think, is both awesome and sucks at the same time because you put yourself out there to be crushed. And all three of these people have gone through that. And I thought, as well as many of you in the audience, I know that as well because I've seated the audience with some of you by, personal invitations. And let me kind of explain a little bit of how this is going to go. I put together a fair number of questions. I don't need you guys to answer every question. If you want to contribute, feel free to. It's not. Thank you, Brennan. It's not a thing where I say, man, you've got to answer. So I think that's kind of my thought was, and I'm also really, really a big fan. This should be interactive. If you think I'm full of crap, notice how I censored because of that. But if you think, FCC all over. But if you think it's malarkey, again, call it. Hey, I don't think you're right. I'd really like this to be a discussion. That's the idea, and the intention was an honest discussion. So I asked folks from the education community to be able to be a part of this because I think that's a critical piece. I'd love all kinds of voices represented. So I thought the first question was just, where are we? What's the current state of the union? And we'll start with panel, and then feel free to jump in. We have a roving microphone as well for anyone who wants to do more than just tell me my hair's big.
So I get to interact in what we call the ecosystem a lot, right? And I get interviewed, and we get people from around the country come and visit, and I have in my email request from a magazine that wants to talk about what's happening in Chattanooga. Those of you who get a chance to be part of this, like when you travel and you tell people you're from Chattanooga, in this kind of startup world, people say, oh, I love what's happening in Chattanooga. Now, this is going to be very raw and very real. We at Chattanooga, what I tell people all the time are, and I really think it's one of Chattanooga's great skills, and lately I've even been told it comes from a historical background, but we're really good at faking it till you make it. Like I tell people Chattanooga is like a developer, right? A developer sells you a development in a swamp, right? And tells you, hey, this is going to be something amazing. You got to buy in today. And if you buy in today, and I actually think Chattanooga's on the positive side. I know that sounds almost negative, but it's a great place, but it's been able to paint a vision of what we're going to be long before we've been there. And so I get asked all the time about the gig. Well, tell me how the gig affected Chattanooga. And this is my basic answer. I said, do you understand what a gig is? A gig means that I can watch, what is it, something like 135 high-definition videos at the same time in my house, and every house in Chattanooga, if it were to connect to it, would be able to do that. How many houses do you know need to connect, nowadays almost all of us, but need to connect to 135 high-definition videos? Most people, I know people, you know people, we've all talked to people who connected to a gig only years later to find out that their router is connected at 100 megabytes per second.
There it is.
Right?
There it is.
And you're sitting there and you're like, and still you paid every month to tell people you had the gig. And most of us who've connected, I connected a call center with 80 VoIP connections at 8 megabytes, fiber connection, and we had no loss of, so that's who we tell people, that's what we paint. But what I tell people is the gig was an incredible opportunity for Chattanooga to position itself on a national platform. We were the first gig city. We were, like, it positioned us and it allowed us to talk about what we were going to become. So again, think developer. It's still, I mean, Chattanooga's not a swamp, so I'm not trying to offend. But it's still, we're not there yet from a technology perspective, from a startup perspective. We were a swamp back then, but we're promising what we're going to be. Now the question is, will we get to, and what do we need to get to so that we're all watching 135 HD videos in our house, right? Like, what needs to be done? And so
high bar. Aaron, you want to answer the same question? You want to take it somewhere different?
Oh no, I got all kinds of stuff for this one. So to continue on from like what the vision the city set and then the accomplishment, we look at the aquarium. Like when I've been here since I was a kid. And so watching from when I was a kid, we would come to Woolworths and then there was a McDonald's downtown, and you didn't leave that area of downtown, like right at the corner of MLK, because it was dangerous. To now, like, we live and walk up and down the streets, and it's kind of a much better city. If you look at where that started, it was the development of the aquarium and the riverfront. Like, that was a vision set 10 years before they would ever see it realized. And so I will give the city credit in that we have set what we want to accomplish from an entrepreneur's perspective and being able to support those people with an entrepreneurial vision. However, we have all currently been sold what I feel is at least a half of a false set of expectations. We are told that if you have startups of any size, of any type, Chattanooga is the place you need to come. It's cheap labor, it's cheap to live, it's cheap, 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 cheap. The problem is that when we set the expectation of cheap, then a lot of the positive benefits that can come from that change disappear because everybody's looking at it as a way just to capture the low cost of being able to run a business. What we don't look at is the deficit of educated people, the deficit of even understanding what the curriculum is to get people trained to be able to go work at a Carbon 5, to be able to go work at a Very. And then what happens when you have a Carbon 5 and a Very enter the market and then pull amazing resources out? Where does that leave the rest of the startup founders? So we're then going to struggle to find people who are willing to give their time after hours or when they feel like it. Or I love Will because he's helped me more times than I can count. Adam Jimerson has also helped me. Like, these guys gave up their family time to help push our vision forward. And then those of us who are startup founders struggle to pay them because there's no money.
Right.
That is the biggest thing that we have in the entire state of Tennessee, and it's actually into the southeast. But Launch Tennessee, which is based out of Nashville, just published that 70% of startup founders state that access to capital is the hardest problem. When I started QuickQ all the way back in 2011, I got $100,000 at the end of a 48-hour launch to send people text message via an app so that you didn't have to wait in line at a restaurant. That was the premise. $100,000, figure it out. As of now, I've been working on Whirly for 2 years. We're on the 8th product iteration, and we've raised $130,000. By this time at QuickQ, I'd already had $2.5 million in the bank to be able to push the product forward. We had 20 people on staff. And now, today, having a better product with the opportunity to access a $6 trillion hole in the market, I can't raise money.
Can I pile on a little bit, Aaron? And this is, you said something about that concept of cheap. And I bring this up just because, again, the collective value of the people in this room. When we position ourselves as cheap or rural sourcing, I don't know if you've heard that term before, but the concept of cheap, it becomes a race to the bottom. It devalues what we provide. So the message of Chattanooga, instead of being, man, we're cheap, you should come here. It's way cheaper, cheaper cost of living, cheaper value, cheaper gas, cheaper bread, cheaper everything. Instead, it's about, no, the quality. The value that you get is high here. You get better things here. That has to be the message. Otherwise, it becomes a race to the bottom. And the second that another city can come in, or another community, or another country can come in and say, I can offer you a lower price, a lower price, now we've lost our competitive edge. Our value can never, ever be, we're cheaper.
And then the one thing I'll end my comment is, when another city figures out that this is a life cycle and not a race to a finish line, right, they're going to kill us. And right now, Huntsville and Birmingham are about to blow completely past Chattanooga from the idea that we're going to educate people. We're going to do on-the-job training for people. They've got holes in technology companies where places like Airship are bringing on junior-level devs and then giving them the space to make some mistakes and learn on the job. Right. Like, we don't get that here.
That's a lot harder. Dirk, do you want to?
Yeah, I was going to comment on that as well, too, because when you're talking about the race to the bottom, I think when you do that, you risk also losing your best talent to people that are going to pay you, Silicon Valley wages to work remotely in Chattanooga, or reload you to a company and pay you $150K a year, So I think that's the thing, too. If you harp on the fact that it's cheap to live in Chattanooga, I think you run the risk of losing your best talent, and that's not going to be good for the community at all.
I mean, the staff at QuickQ was the example of that. OpenTable came in, and then they told everybody, hey, we're going to pay you West Coast salaries. And then they're like, oh, by the way, we don't want you to live in Chattanooga anymore. We'll move you to the West Coast now, but we're going to still pay you the same amount of money. Right. It's like the value proposition is completely different between Chattanooga and being in San Francisco.
Any other additional comments? I missed that one initially. Any other thoughts on that? Because, I like where that's going. Yeah, John?
I just say you mentioned Huntsville, and to me that's a great thing. My frustration with Chattanooga is a lot of our students intern summer, and then the next summer they go to that one, and they can point to a series of buildings, each of which soak up hundreds of interns, and then they're like, would you like to come to school here? For a lot of people, the answer at that point is, cool. I don't even have to move my stuff.
Why the hell not?
Yeah. Whereas I struggle, I've got a few places that I can push students out to, but it's not like that. across, and then it starts. Got that covered, right?
Dirk, I don't want to, take over. So, otherwise,
Dirk, you
he's
got the
there
wrong
just to
chair.
look good, and the rest of us are answering questions. It's interesting because, and how many of you are here from the Southeast? So I'm going to hopefully offend you all, because I'm not. But one of the cultural things that I've encountered coming to the Southeast is the incredible hospitality until you actually need something deeper, and then it's like, wait a minute, you were so nice before, but now I'm asking you for something and suddenly they're AWOL, right? Like, where they go, I can't get an email back, I can't get it. And I think from a corporate perspective, so I'm taking it there, there's a little bit of that. It's like, we love what's going on. Yeah, but I need to place interns. I actually need people to learn on the job how to do this kind of work so that they can excel, so that they can grow. Well, no, what if, you hear this a lot in the mentality, but then we'll teach them all this and we invested all this time and they'll go somewhere else. Yes, that's what happens. People go other places. And if we're pouring into people and we're pouring into developing an area and a region, we want to be able to know that people will go through a wider door, out through a wider door than the door they came in through. That's just a reality, and we'll capture from other people, and we'll. So it has to go deeper than just saying, yeah, we're supportive, we love you all, that's great, I love what you're doing. Hey, Aaron, you're a great guy. It has to go beyond that to saying, you know what, there is a risk, there is a sacrifice, there may be a loss, but it's worth it for the bigger picture, for the common good, for building the vision that we're trying to build.
I think this is an interesting question, and I do want to move something. How many of you would you consider to be new to the Southeast? I just move, transplants. Yeah. How many would you consider themselves local or maybe grew up in the Southeast? Okay, interesting. I just think that's, I think, another thing to sort of consider as we're sort of looking at this whole piece, the dynamics. This is both sort of an existing sort of ecosystem that says this is how we do things, and then there's a bunch of people moving in, self-included, that said, oh, but okay, where do I fit? How does this thing work? One of the things I'd like to move the conversation a little bit, and it's a little bit around sort of, it's beyond just tech, right? Beyond just sort of building and that, or financing money. But it's around the concept of resources. One of the things Dirk and I have talked about, Dirk is sort of scaling up sales operations. That it's all of those supporting services, right? We're talking about technical support. We're talking about sales. We're talking about everything, all of the other pieces, accounting and that. What are the challenges that you're facing while sort of building a sales team in Chattanooga? Selling tech, selling software as a service. We're competing head to head at a national level with everyone else. What are the challenges you face?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was actually just thinking about when we were talking about the cheap versus working remote. So with PriceWaiter, the vast majority of our clients are e-commerce shops in New York or in Denver or out in California. There's almost no e-commerce shops in town. I could count them on one hand. Part of one of the uphill challenges is just proximity. In New York, when I go do a trip there, I can walk from building to building and go meet with people. And here, it's like I'm out on an island. And so you have to get really efficient with your messaging. It's a lot harder to network. So that's one of the other big challenges. And then another thing with what you were saying about training people and internships. When I used to work at Access America Transport, it's a logistics firm, and it's massive. If you were to put logistics firm Chattanooga on a map, there'd be 100 pins. It'd be like, it would go crazy. So there's a great network there of people that you can learn from each other and work alongside them. But when it comes to actually scaling up a software sales team, there's not a lot of resources and there's not a lot of people doing it.
And not people to learn from either.
Right, yeah, and mentorship. So yeah, I mean, it's difficult and it's a challenge we're all trying to figure out, just learning the hard way.
Well, and I'll speak from a personal perspective, like there's a lot of pressure on us to hire from within. I mean, we want to bring in local talent, we want to use local people, but to that end, if it's hard to find those people because we don't have those systems of training to get them in place. And this is one of those things where it was like, how is it that we have sort of universities saying, how do I place my students? And we have institutions, folks like us saying, how do we get good resources, right?
So I got a question for you guys before I make a statement. How many people moved here for a job?
Good question.
How many people have changed jobs once you got here and an opportunity didn't work out?
One, right.
So I grew up here, went to University of Tennessee, Knoxville, came back when ST3, which was the first ever big startup in Chattanooga, got formed. And I was there for 2 years when it finally crashed, which is probably why Chattanooga's so burned on big startups, is because that was $25 million down the hole. But one of the things that I quickly realized as I went through and I learned telecommunications, I was actually part of the team that built the first ever gig network here in Chattanooga, MetroNet, before EPB ever had the gig. I was also part of the team that was at Covista Communications when we built what eventually became Magic Jack. And so I've seen some pretty cool opportunities start here and then either evolve in different manners or leave. Me personally, I couldn't work in Chattanooga. I've tried. As a consultant, I can pull in $125 to $150 an hour. I get paid by foreign countries to be there for $1,500 a day plus expenses. I can't make $75,000 a year as an IT guy here in Chattanooga. Like,
Tough.
And so when we pull people in here, this is part of the vision that we've disconnected. When we pull people here, where do you go when you don't fit? If you pull someone from San Francisco and New York who has a more liberal viewpoint on life,
Area.
and then you come to Chattanooga and you don't fit the culture, where do you go?
Birmingham. Wait,
I mean, when you really start looking at it, you're like, Nashville's getting to be a little more progressive and a lot more opportunity, but it's super niche again. Atlanta, yet again, the same problem. And so that's a thing we have to look at as Chattanooga from a corporate standpoint, from an education standpoint, from kind of an entrepreneurial vision that we're selling people when they come. What happens when it doesn't work out? There's no safety nets for people to move around here.
Sure. Well, I have a sort of take that. I think spot on. I think one of the things that, if I was building Chattanooga back when, right, I would think, let's build infrastructure, right? Let's build a place where innovation can grow, right? And what we'll see is that it will eventually just grow because that's the nature of a free market, right? We create conditions. It's not our job to create the businesses. It's our job to create the conditions where they can be successful. So I think that we did that. We're seeing entrepreneurs come through. There are resources available. It's a hard job to do out of Chattanooga, but it's certainly doable. We have some models that we can look at for success. I've long thought there's a point in time, like looking at kind of the workforce, there are those sort of entrepreneurs, right? I think that there are also quite a few people who are here that are just kind of, I'm pointing at Damon, who are sort of remote workers, right? They're working for someone else, but they're taking advantage of the gig network in their house. And so are we supporting that? I also think, in terms of that whole piece, what about bringing in a large sort of fish or whale, an Intel or an Apple computer? I'm throwing out whatever names, right? It doesn't matter. The point is having that big whale that comes in that sort of forces us to work together. I don't know. Yeah, ooh, I love it when I can spark conversations.
That kind of happened with Volkswagen. Volkswagen came in and it completely changed the landscape of manufacturing. All these jobs and for building the facilities and opened up opportunities. They helped start opportunities for education. Town, but they have to be invested in the.
So when I started my work at Launch, and again, we focus on micro business entrepreneurship, and intentionally, I tell people even, again, I do this nationally, and I meet in conferences where everyone's working on these, high scale, high growth accelerators, and I tell people I'm unapologetically about micro business. And when I came here, what I kept hearing from people is, well, we're looking for home run hitters. And so I've used this phrase a million times, so if you've heard it, but I tell people you don't get home run hitters by selecting a small group of people and saying, I think you'd know how to hit a home run. Come with me. You get home run hitters by teaching the vast majority of people to bat. And the more people learn how to bat, the more some people will start showing special skill, and ability, and they start saying, I think I could do this. And then we start seeing people rise to the top. And yes, of course, we put resources around those people. But I also say, here's the problem with a home run hitter. Let's call it the big whale, the company that comes in and hires 1,000 people. One, most of the wealth of that doesn't actually stay here. Most of that wealth goes elsewhere because it was born elsewhere. Secondly, most of it stays at the very top, right? So let's say the company has a very successful exit. That exit doesn't affect the entire community, it affects usually the people at the top. Right. It's not a either or, it's a both and. I always tell people, without a doubt, that high scale, high growth from a direct financial return will make a lot more money. But the impact of having lots of people starting lots of things within a community. So as you came in, Janan's Kitchen, one of our entrepreneurs that we're very proud of, stop and eat their food. That's another issue I've got, is we're not trying new things. We're not testing each other's apps. We're not learning from each other. We're all so busy, excited about what's out there, and we're not really giving a chance to things here. But the more we build this network of people starting crazy things. So I moved to Austin, and I got in, and I'll shut up after this. I got into entrepreneurship because I tell people, you land in Austin and you've got a business idea. Like it's something, there's something in the air, it's in the water, suddenly you're thinking about a business. And you sit down and you have a conversation and everyone's telling you their startup that they're talking about. But what do you see in Austin? You see food trucks on every corner. Right. And what's a food truck? It's a micro business entrepreneur's low barrier to entry opportunity to get a business off the ground. Like the entire ecosystem and ethos of the city is like, yeah, you can get something started. And I used to tell people all the time from this very room, so if you can point me to our first food truck, please do. And nobody could, but now we've got the Greek food truck cart over there, which is phenomenal, and you got to go eat there. It's it's a cart, it doesn't count. No, anyway, so but we need to build that mentality of we're supporting everybody who's getting something off the ground here. Most of us won't succeed in that process, but we'll learn and we'll grow and we'll vary and we'll do things like that.
I was going to say, can you sugarcoat that? Just kidding. But no, I think that's a great question. How many of you are hurting for users or test users or trying things out? I know Aaron is. I mean, audience point, that's one of the things we struggled with.
WOORLY.
But I think that's a great example. How are we supporting each other in this effort, right? We talked about sort of the sort of channel between education and that, but how is that vertical or I guess horizontal? Look at me, I don't know my directions. How's that horizontal? How are we helping each other? What does Chattav type of things fit? Continue.
I just wanted to speak a little bit to like how do we get like university students hired? Does the onus fall on the companies in town, or is there more of a community? I think there's more of a community effort that could be made between the Chattanooga developers, between the universities, and between the employers, so it doesn't just fall on them. I think there's a lot of stuff in our educational system and universities specifically that I think needs to change to actually fit what we're actually doing in business, because if it's kind of a problem if you get a 4-year degree in computer science and you can't get a job. right out the bat because you haven't been given the skills that you need. So I
That
think
.NET degree is not working out for you? Come on.
so I think there's a lot of that can happen. But I think there needs to be like a coming together of those three different realms, because I think there's a lot going on in the Chattanooga developer community, but we haven't been able to reach the students at the universities. And I think there's, with like some of the startup people, they are just trying to keep their startup going, and they're missing opportunities to connect with the Chattanooga developer community.
So to directly address that point, we as a community need to set the expectation for what we want and then find somebody to take the risk, because that's going to be the differentiator. We can't rely specifically on a school, because if we rely on the school and we say, you guys are going to do amazing stuff, we're going to do all these jobs, and then there's no jobs, then we've failed. If we create an opportunity to educate people, we bring people in, no jobs. If there's lots of jobs, but we train them for the wrong stuff, it fails.
Right.
So we need to look at this as a life cycle of where we are, where we're headed, what technology changes are, and then get people in the loop. All of you guys, I hate to say this, are going to have to come back and contribute to what you're working on and tell the people who are going through today, if you want a job now, learn React Native, Ruby on Rails, all the stuff that we use.
Just saying.
So like, we need to push that back on people so when they come out, they're not lost. So that companies like us, we could have, hey, we're going to put $5,000 into a dev weekend, and here's the 10 products and projects that we'd like to see, and whoever can accomplish these, you're going to get a portion of that money as a team, and then we'll continue to work with you. Do things that are outside the box. We really need to go back to that, because in 2009, when we had 48-hour launch, when we had the original Chaw Dev, and some of the other things like that happened all the time, but we've lost it. The other thing I want to talk about is the Volkswagen opportunity and Amazon and some of these other large entities that we get in the Enterprise Center. Those are islands. They do not participate in the community as a whole. They've come in, they've created jobs, but they don't actually push the boundaries. They don't change the culture. They've set their culture, they created in an island, and then they sit out there. And worse, they pull resources out. Like, we don't get to see that trickle back in and feed back in. And that's the one thing I have against Amazon and, Volkswagen here is, what else are you doing besides just giving us jobs? And then finally is Startup Week was a couple weeks ago. How many of you guys saw the biggest startups in town participate? I mean, when you look at it, we didn't see anything from Squid. We didn't see anything from Bellhops. So my question has always been, not to fault them, they're probably busy like we are, but if these are the biggest entities in town that are our unicorns, what are they doing to come back and contribute? And have we as a community failed them? Or is it something we can do better? Or is it something that they just aren't getting benefit out of? Like, that's one of my biggest questions, because I went through all these startup events and I'm like, there's some really cool stuff, but what are the big guys doing?
Right.
Like the people who've raised $10 million or more, how are things going for you?
How do we follow that model? Did you want to follow up?
I did have one challenge for you. We are putting on several educational events. I know I've been putting on Rails bridges, Elixir bridges, Git with GitHub intros, stuff like that. We did a React JS little hackathon learning thing. So there is stuff. I think the thing that's missing is, how do we connect those things to the students, to the employers? So I think it's still happening. It's
You download Whirly, just FYI.
Just download Whirly. That's the solution.
That's kind of what we do.
I just want to tell you, I graduated computer science, and what I learned there was, what I learned at MTSU, where I went to before then, was C++. I didn't learn really anything important. And all my practical real-world knowledge, I didn't learn anything important really in school. The waterfall method, it's not even important right now. Oh, agile, no, actually we didn't even learn agile.
Right.
Everything important I've learned, I've had to learn on the job at my current workplace, or I learned it from the community where no one's really.
Yeah, so I graduated from UTC in 2016, and I'm going to back up what you two both said. However, I'm going to caveat that by saying consider, you know, what the largest employers of IT computer science graduates are in the city: TVA, Unum, Blue Cross, right? So their needs are very, very different from needs of startup world. So learning Waterfall, learning Java is very useful in that kind of, you know, industry. So while I think that people that are going through those computer science programs are being taught towards what their greatest chance of, you know, going into is, you know, it's going to be more incumbent upon the students themselves to branch out into more modern, relevant technologies if they want to get hired by a startup that's leveraging those technologies. Now, there is also probably some onus on the startups, you know, to make aware what those technologies are so that the students know to learn them. But, you know, I think that's part of the problem too, is that we have to realize the reality of the fact that, you know, that probably 8 out of 10 students that graduate from one of our, you know, local universities are going to work at one of those big 3 employees where all those skills are going to be very different than what we're looking for.
That's the thing that I get super concerned about, because I went from UTK computer science to UTC computer science, and I ended up being a business major. Okay, because my teacher was adjunct from TVA, and he showed up, he's like, hey, here's the Java course, figure it out. So I, of course, sat down for the first week, knocked it all out, and never showed back up again. And so it was like useless at that point for me. Not gonna knock UTC necessarily, because what they're teaching you is the ability to learn something. But when we set that expectation of what you just said, that you're gonna get a job at the big 3, when you go look at the qualifications to get those jobs, you're not qualified when you graduate. Like, you have to have real world experience, at least 3 to 5 years. And that's for a junior position. So you're coming out and you're gonna have to go work somewhere else, before you can even come back to get a job at one of the top 3. And I think that is a huge disconnect between what the business community is expecting and then what we're putting out from our educational institutions.
Yeah, I was just to say, I know folks that went from internships in Blue Cross and TVA, well, Blue Cross more than TVA, from internships there into full-time jobs. But if you're saying that there's a big disconnect between graduates and those top 3 employers, that would be news to me.
So I have no idea, but that was why do we have that statistic? Because that would be an amazing thing to know, is if that's actually really the case, or is it what is actually what I was proposing.
Yeah, I'm just speaking from intuition and observation. I don't have the data.
Well, and then that needs to actually happen. Yeah. Like, not to you, but like UTC, it definitely should happen. How many of your graduates went to the top 3 places?
Yeah. Well, I was just gonna say, because as somebody who came from outside, like, I've only been in Chattanooga 3 years. I was here like 20 years ago, but that was just for fun. But it was like coming from the outside and coming into here. I mean, the main reason why I took it was because I could have gigabit internet, and I was living in Philadelphia, and they have crappy internet, so it was just, yeah, Comcast. But anyway, so it was kind of that thing. But the other side of it too is, when I was in Philadelphia, I could go to, I mean, there's CHADEV, which is why I come to this, because it's the only thing. I mean, there's other stuff, but it's a lot of stuff that I don't really have the knowledge of, or not necessarily the knowledge of, just the drive to go after, you know, trying to learn. I already know C++, C#, Java. I mean, I actually have a degree in video games, but that's right. Yeah, so that's part of it, right? Like, we have a lot of tech.
Getting my degree, honey, leave me alone.
Studying. Right. Not in playing video games and actually making them. So I should have clarified that. But no, it's kind of that we need to kind of push some way of doing stuff that's more fun. Like, we have the hackathons, things like that. For somebody who's really into programming, that's fun. For somebody who's not into programming at all, that is just, you don't understand what's going on. But games, people know what's going on, you know, not just games either, like just fun apps or things like that. Like I said, in Philadelphia, in Florida when I lived there, in North Carolina even, there's game days or whatever, and it's kind of the same thing as the CHADEV, but it's just focused on, hey, let's make games. We'll make it in this language. We'll make it in, you know, doing this thing. And it kind of pulls that whole thing in there, but it's also, a lot of those are nationwide. So they'll do game nights or whatever, where people in California are in 24 hours make a game. People in Austin make a game in 24 hours. People in Philly make a game. And you just kind of get to show off, hey, we made this game. 90% of them are really crappy. and terrible, because I've made some of them that are really crappy and terrible. But it's just kind of some way to bring more people into, and kind of also connecting us into nationwide, instead of just being, hey, we're Chattanooga, we have gigabit.
I would love to see 48-hour launch make its way back. Like
48-hour launch.
That was the best. I went through 3 of them. It was the best experience I had, to see people come up with the randomest stuff and try to finish it in 48 hours.
Which we don't need food. But I think I do want to highlight one of the things that you said, which was not necessarily pro games, because not everyone's pro game, but the idea that like it has to be something that's engaging and interesting and gets you excited, that gets you up in the morning, because if it's not, I know that we're running sort of up until the end, so we've got about 5 minutes until 1. I know, it went by fast. I wanted to give everyone a chance. Are there questions that we didn't ask that we should have? And we probably, the best sort of panel discussions like this are the type that continue on outside of the conversations continue, and we want this to continue on as well. What are the questions that we didn't ask today that we should have? What are the things we should have talked about? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Megan Furr. I'm actually working on the same stuff you guys are talking about through an initiative called Reboot Chattanooga. We're currently in our survey phase. I'm not supposed to use that word, but that's what it is. I'm trying to hear from as many people as possible. So if you have opinions or ideas or things from this discussion that spark you, that you think, yeah, I want that to happen too, come see me.
And how do we get a hold of you? What's the best way to do that?
I'm Megan at rebootchattanooga.org.
Megan at rebootchattanooga.org. And you're working to sort of
asking these same questions, like how do we, and you guys, I appreciate it because all the feedback here has mirrored so much other feedback. We need more engagement and connection. Everybody is in silos, and how can we get
right?
But my question is, on the flip side, on the positive, like what is working? What are the successes that a lot of people in this room might not know about that would help them? Resources in the area or online or might not know about.
For better or worse, Collab has been amazing. Ever since its inception, actually when it was all the way back to create here, that central hub. And then the one critical thing that I've always had of Collab recently is the connection point. How do we know about what you're working on? How do we know what you're working on? There needs to be one central hub of information in Chattanooga, and I personally feel that the mandate that Collab has been given needs to carry that torch.
And can I just say how awesome it is that you came? Because like, it's kind of reflecting that whole concept, right? Like, how do we break down those silos a little bit? Probably someone posted and reposted, and you saw it on Twitter or Facebook or LinkedIn. You're like, there goes my job. They're doing it for me. But again, I think it's fantastic, and that's part of it. So I wrote that down. What is working? The things that I think CHADEV is a undervalued resource. What we're doing here, I think we need to reinvest in it as a community if we want to see that grow. Obviously, there's other things, but I also want to miss the opportunity. Are there other questions that we should have asked and spent time on today that we didn't? Things that you think, man, we need to be talking about as part of this greater discussion. Not that we're going to roll this into, maybe we'll do this quarterly. Who knows? This is kind of a fun day. But kind of as part of that, what didn't we ask? Yeah.
Quick question. I don't know everything about what's going on in Chattanooga, but I know at the beginning of your talk you said you'd love to talk about what you're working on. And I heard about Worley today. I don't know anything about it, but it sounds cool. Is there any current
WOORLY?
Are there any current venues where existing startups are like not 48-hour launch, but like last year we launched or something like that, where people could present what they've launched? And I know CHADEV's a bad venue for it because you don't want to be advertising your product.
I don't think that has to be a bad venue, because here's the deal. You break out the code and you start looking at the stuff, I'm going to get super excited, the stuff that we're working on. I'm going to be like, right, look at that coolness, right? And that's that stuff that's like, that's what gets us up in the morning. That's what we're excited about. So that level of interest, I mean, I'd love to see, break us down. from a technology standpoint, from a professional standpoint, all of those pieces. Not today, Aaron.
Right now. Not right now.
Don't you do that. Okay. What else do you have? Because, again, I think we have 1 minute. I want to honor people's time.
So let me just answer that briefly. Probably 1 million cups is a good place for people who've already launched and are going to be able to share. So there's a round table of that. Anyways. $1 million cups, Chattanooga. Wednesday, 9 o'clock, here.
I was just going to say, now that we have 1 minute left, I think the most important thing is organize ourselves so we can more narrow ourselves into these time right now. And have their own meetings, like each one of them. So if there's a way we can
At closing, how beautiful is that? There are those things. There are community meetups that take place throughout the week, every month, every week. Like and Chadav should be that place that we look to say, where are they, when are they? It is 1 o'clock. Thank you guys for coming today. This was super fun. Justin, do you have any closing remarks?
I do. Next week, we're taking a break because Thanksgiving. And
you can come.
We're not going to have turkey pizza. So,
it won't be here.
We don't have anything scheduled for the following week, but I think out of this discussion, we're going to have something really cool coming up. So
there you go. And
join us.
And then I'd say call for speakers. If you have an idea, reach out to me, reach out to Justin. We'd love to talk to you and sort of help cultivate that into an idea, a presentation, a thing. Okay.